I want to move on now to like the big piece you just did, forecasting the 2024 election, and like the headline is you have it's like the country is leaning Democratic, but like the real point of the piece is that the Dobbs decision has like essentially in your reading erased any structural advantage that the GOP once had in the electoral college. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the point is there, and this is like the way I look at it is like a kind of like a bit of like an esoteric viewing of the states. I'm not like saying states are necessarily leaning one way or the other, but it's like what does the map look like if you have like more of a neutral or just slightly Democrat or Republican leaning national environment? Like what is the bias towards in that case? And for the past two elections, it's been heavily Republican leaning. There are states that like Biden or barely won, but while he was winning by 4 points nationally, so like you could have had like a totally like even national vote, like no advantage one side or the other, and Trump would be winning Michigan and like Wisconsin by 4. No, Pennsylvania to Wisconsin by 4. What I saw from Dobbs is that the environment last year in 2022 was Republican leaning, not by a lot, but by like it was like by about 1 or 2 points. But they were still losing in all of these swing states. And what that it's obviously bad to lose in swing states in any circumstances, but it's worse to lose in swing states when you're winning nationally slightly, like what happened with Hillary. So the problem for Republicans is that like there's a significant indication, and it makes sense if you take the Dobbs stuff seriously, like you should, that like the impacts of it haven't been even across the board. Like obviously Florida and New York didn't really care about it. The states that care the most about Dobbs are disproportionately swing states, and that's like both North and South. So it's like it mattered. It's like made a huge difference in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, a little bit in Georgia, but not a ton. And all these states like are like just less Republican than they were previously. And even if the rest of the map is the same, that makes winning the presidency a lot more difficult for them.
I mean, like I mean, like obviously, like the removal of a human right that's existed for like several generations in in American life is obviously going to have huge consequences. But do you think, like, in terms of the movement in these swing states, it's sort of a factor about like when making abortion illegal is all theoretical. There's a good number of people who call themselves pro-life, or at least would have no problem voting for a pro-life politician because they know it's all sort of like theoretical and it's established law, blah blah blah. But
It's
then now
exactly
when
what
it's
happened
like
in New York.
yeah, and now that it's like a real thing, and like these are like they're now like half the country, like women are facing prosecution for trying to obtain an abortion. Like any Republican, anyone with an R next to their name, much less little one that's like staunchly pro-life, which is all of them. Like that's no longer a theoretical choice that you're making that you can overlook because you want low taxes or like limited regulation or whatever.
Absolutely. And the problem with them is that it's never bad to have a situation like that under any circumstances. You never want to have this overriding issue hanging around your party like a scarlet letter. But what's especially bad for Republicans is that this will never go away. This is going to be a permanent issue. Just like how like pro-choice, when like it was established, that never stopped being an issue for Democrats. This isn't like COVID or even like the war on terror, where it was like really like potent for a brief period, but it had a timer. Like obviously the pandemic is going to end, the war is going to end one way or the other. Like this is just a policy issue that's perpetually going to be relevant, and it's just always going to haunt them in every election. And people aren't used to thinking about like shifts like that are that permanent. It was really resistant to the way a lot of people thought about stuff. Like there are like really infamous, like kind of just the amount that people overlooked it in 2022 was unbelievable. Like there was one like really high level guy who just like tried to prove that abortion stopped being an issue. And this is like seriously what he did.
Post Dobbs, he tried to say that abortion stopped being an issue.
Yeah, he said it was an issue immediately after they did the ruling, but people stopped caring about it. Like it was a fucking, like it was like the Bin Laden raid or something. Like it just lost salience. And like his proof of that was that he got Google Trends and he put in economy and he put in abortion, and abortions stopped being Googled as much after a couple weeks. And that was proof that people care more about the economy than abortion.
No, people are trying to hide it.
And he put this like in the official New York Times graphic, and it was just a Google Trends graph.
Oh my God. Well, no, what he should have known is that in states where it's now illegal, people were searching abortion, but with the A as an ampersand to avoid.
Yeah. Or the idea about that, just like just searching abortion. Why would you just search abortion?
Yeah, I think that like almost everyone who professionally, either is a pollster or watches polls or makes these types of prognostications, they lost any ability to see anything outside of a 24-hour news cycle.
Mm-hmm.
They got, I mean, and it's an easy mistake to make because that is almost everything in the last like 7 or 8 years, really.
Yeah, I have some sympathy.
Last for like a week max, but it that doesn't mean that that's going to be the only thing. It's still possible for there to be enormous shifts, obviously.
Yeah. Biden still hasn't recovered from Afghanistan. It's been a year and a half now, and he still is like at 40% because of that. Like and I have sympathy for that. I understand why people feel that way, because it's like after watching everything with Trump and just having it beaten over your head, like this thing you think is really important, people don't care. They don't care about it. Your perspective is wrong. There's just that like people are kind of like whipped into like not like really trusting like their own instincts on stuff like that. But I still like I can understand where it comes from, but I thought for people who like do this as a profession, it was really, really lazy.
Yeah.
I mean, like we saw the results in the midterms, which is like a historically poor showing for the Republicans, or like any party out of power going into a midterm election, at least of recent vintage. But like, okay, like I don't know if you saw New York Magazine this week, but they have a big headline that says "Abortion wins elections," or I suppose criminalizing abortion wins elections for Democrats. But like, I was struck by in the midterm elections just how little Democrats actually ran on abortion. Like, so I mean, it seems like it had this huge effect, but Democrats were able to take advantage of it mostly by not really campaigning or talking on it. Like, do you see evidence of that changing, or would talking about it like? Or making it a quote unquote culture war issue in an election that you have to like go back and forth on, does that sap the electoral power of this, or is this just cowardice on the behalf of the Democrats who should be out there, like directly confronting this monstrous situation?
I think Biden was very kind of weak on it. His response to it was kind of baffling at the time. And I think it depended on the candidate, like in the swing states especially, where they had these really impressive showings. There was a lot of focus on like abortion. Like I remember like seeing ads. I lived like in my state for the Herschel Walker race. There was stuff about how like he opposed it all the time. Like in Michigan, like they had a whole referendum on abortion. They timed specifically like the gay marriage referendums in 2004 to coincide with the election to boost them. The only candidate I think notably didn't do it was the governor of Kansas, who's a Democrat, because they were under the impression people would care more about the economy, which is a bit strange to see, like, after, like, the referendum there. Like, the abortion won 60% of the vote there. But she ended up winning re-election, so, like, what do I know? I think with Biden, there is, like, kind of, like, this... Obviously, he's not a great messenger for it. And he is... I think there's a bit of kind of personal vanity on the White House's part to, like, really focus a lot on, like, the bills they pass because they want to feel like they have some legacy. But I do think it's overthinking it a lot.
The infrastructure bill, like that's yeah. Well, that's on one side of the scale, and then like the criminalization of abortion goes on the other. I wonder what people are going to remember about Biden's tenure in office.
Yeah, I mean, I get like the ego part of it, but it's like don't make this too complicated. It's not always this. You don't need to think about it too hard. Like that's been the case historically. Like the biggest shifts have just been something that's just obvious and hammering on that.
Well, I mean, like, and speaking of obviousness, I mean, like you mentioned, like that this issue is not going to go away because for the foreseeable future, abortion will remain illegal and increasingly more and more illegal, even if you don't live in a state that's like deep red or whatever. But I guess like my question is like like by a 70-30 split, Americans would prefer did not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned and would prefer abortion to remain illegal for those seeking its service. But here's the deal, like, with the way the court system is now, with the federal courts and the Supreme Courts and like these, or judges in Texas or whatever who are making or like taking cases that either like where they do rule in a way that affects the entire nation, or is basically by like judicial fiat removing even more rights, like the right to the morning after pill or things like that. Like, will this matter for Republicans? Like, I mean, like, because like just how unpopular can something get when they have their bony claws over like every choke point of like either the state elections or the court system in this country. Well, and like, and if so, what will that mean for like our politics going forward?
Like for the policy, I don't know. It's like these types of things are very long term. Republicans, it took them decades to be able to get rid of this, and like that's just the nature of the court system. Like if you're going to go totally by the book, it's going to take you decades to like overturn this. The thing I think that is kind of interesting is, and I think a bit overlooked, because the courts obviously do decide tons of policy, but they really only do so because there's such an absence of policy making from Congress over the past 20 years. Like they had the really big like ruling like about the EPA last summer, like and that was supposed to be really big, but really all that ruling said was that like the Congress never enumerated that the EPA had this right. So in the big like reconciliation bill that they passed, they enumerated the EPA did have that authority, and it made the court decision moot. Like obviously they can try to do a new case and go farther on that, but like there's like a certain point where like if you try to just like overturn like stuff like the Commerce Clause, you risk like kind of going after the goose laying the golden eggs. Are they stupid enough to do that? Like probably, but it's definitely not what they prefer. They prefer it to be like, I think their idea was that they would get this passed. It wouldn't necessarily be all that popular, but like it wouldn't affect them electorally. They'd still like maintain power, legislative and judicial levels. But it hasn't turned out that way, and their strategy isn't necessarily calibrated for that. And their legal philosophy is definitely not calibrated for it, because a lot of the stuff in the Dobbs decision assumes that they'll have a pliant Congress. It leaves an opening actually for codifying Roe v. Wade like through law. It was never actually done so. But maybe they could just do like a case where they just overturn that law, but that would require them to set a new precedent, and they're very egotistical people. Like they'll exercise power if they have it, but like they've left themselves kind of like they've had their guards down in some instances, and I don't think that they've really anticipated a lot of what happened.